Chapter 14. Unraveling Threads. Morning light filtered through the cracks in the cabin's wooden walls, casting soft beams across the room. Louis woke up to the faint sound of birds chirping outside, but the warmth of Harry's body pressed against his side kept him still, not wanting to move. For a moment, he allowed himself to forget the chaos waiting for them. Harry stirred beside him, blinking up at Louis with sleepy eyes. "Morning," he murmured, his voice soft. "Morning," Louis replied, smiling slightly. But as reality rushed back in, the weight of what they had uncovered last night returned. "We have a lot to figure out today," Harry sighed, sitting up and running a hand through his messy curls. "Yeah, we do." The smell of coffee brewing in the small kitchen drifted into the bedroom, signaling that Zane was already up. Louis slowly slipped out of bed, pulling on his clothes and motioning for Harry to follow. As they walked into the main room, they found Zane sitting at the table, his laptop open and a serious expression on his face. "Got something?" Louis asked, his tone curious but guarded. Zane glanced up, nodding grimly. "I've been digging through the files all morning. There's a pattern in the offshore accounts, money being funneled to people in media, government, even high-profile celebrities. It's bigger than we thought, Louis. They're not just controlling artists. They're controlling narratives." Louis' jaw clenched. "What kind of narratives?" Zane leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Think about it. The music industry doesn't just produce songs. It creates idols, trends, even movements. They push certain artists forward, control what the public consumes, and then use those artists to sell whatever message they want. But it's not just music, it's in Hollywood too. Films, actors, all being used as pawns." Harry, who had been quiet, spoke up, his voice laced with disbelief. "You're saying they're using us to manipulate people?" Zane nodded slowly. "In a way, yes. The contracts we saw last night weren't just about music. They were about controlling how artists present themselves to the world. If you speak out or go against what they want, you're blacklisted, cut off. But if you play the game, they make sure you stay at the top." Louis clenched his fists, feeling the anger rise within him. It all made sense now, the moments in his career when he felt like he was being pushed into a corner, forced to conform. The way the media would twist his words or paint him as someone he wasn't. And it wasn't just him. He'd seen it happen to other artists too, people who had talent but suddenly vanished when they didn't toe the line. "I always thought there was something off," Louis muttered, pacing the floor. "The way they'd twist everything. But this is beyond what I imagined." Harry watched him carefully. "So, what do we do now?" Zane tapped on the laptop, bringing up another document. "I've been working on tracing the money. If we can find out who's pulling the strings, we can start exposing them. But it's dangerous. These people have resources we can't even begin to match." Louis stopped pacing, his eyes narrowing. "That's exactly why we need to do it. The longer we wait, the more control they'll have." Zane sighed. "I'm with you, but we need to be smart about this. We can't just run into it blind." Louis nodded in agreement. "We'll gather more evidence, get people on our side. But we're not staying quiet." Harry stood, walking over to Louis and taking his hand. "We'll figure it out together," he said softly. His eyes were filled with determination, though Louis could see the flicker of fear there too. They spent the next few hours huddled around the laptop, sifting through files and piecing together the larger puzzle. Louis' contact, an old friend who had once been deep in the industry, had agreed to meet them later that day. She might have answers, but it came with risk. "Do you trust her?" Harry asked as they prepared to leave the cabin, packing up the essentials. Louis paused. "I do. She's been out of the game for a while, but if anyone knows what's going on behind the scenes, it's her." Zane glanced out the window, scanning the perimeter. "We'll have to be careful. No one can know where we're going." The drive to meet her was tense. Louis kept his eyes on the road, his mind racing through what they had learned. Every car that passed them felt like a threat, every turn a potential ambush. But they reached the small cafe without incident. It was tucked away in a quiet part of the city, far from the flashy lights and attention of the public eye. They slipped inside and took a seat at a corner table. Moments later, a woman in her late 30s approached them, her hair tied back in a loose bun and sunglasses perched on her head. Louis stood to greet her. "Claire," he said quietly. "It's been a while." She smiled, though there was a hint of weariness in her expression. "You don't say. I see you've gotten yourself into quite the mess, Tomlinson." "Wouldn't be the first time," Louis replied, gesturing for her to sit. "But this is different." Claire's smile faded as she sat down and lowered her voice. "I know what you're up against. I've seen it before. They've got their claws in everything." Louis leaned forward. "How deep does it go?" Claire sighed, glancing around the cafe as if she was being watched. "Deeper than you think. They own the media, the tabloids. They own the narratives. Ever wonder why certain stories blow up out of nowhere while others disappear? They control it all, and it's not just about money. It's about influence." Harry, who had been quiet, finally spoke up. "What do they want?" Claire looked at him, her eyes somber. "Control. They want to shape culture, influence public opinion, make sure the world sees what they want it to see. The music industry, Hollywood, it's just a tool for them. And if you don't play by their rules, they'll ruin you." Louis clenched his jaw. "We're not going to let that happen." Claire shook her head. "Be careful, Louis. You're stepping into dangerous territory. These people, they don't lose." Louis exchanged a glance with Harry, then Zayn. His resolve only grew stronger. "Then it's time someone made them." As they left the cafe, the air felt heavier, the gravity of what they were facing settling in. But Louis knew there was no turning back now. They had the evidence. They had the will to fight. And soon, they'd have more allies. The cafe door swung closed behind them, and the weight of their conversation with Claire clung to the air like a thick fog. Louis walked ahead, his mind spinning with everything they had just learned. Every step he took felt heavier than the last, the magnitude of their situation pressing down on him. Harry walked beside him, stealing glances at Louis's clenched fists. "What do we do now?" he asked quietly, trying to keep the tremble out of his voice. Louis slowed down, running a hand through his hair. "We keep moving. We have to get more proof, more people to stand with us." He glanced over at Zayn, who had been quiet since they left the cafe. "We need to start making waves, or they'll keep controlling everything." Zayn nodded, his gaze shifting between Louis and Harry. "We've got enough to make them nervous, but not enough to take them down. We need to hit them where it hurts." He reached into his jacket, pulling out a flash drive and handing it to Louis. "This has all the files we found. Offshore accounts, deals, payments. It'll take some time to sift through everything, but once we know who's at the top, we can expose them." Louis took the drive, his fingers gripping it tightly. "Claire said we're stepping into dangerous territory. She's right, but we've got no other choice." Harry slipped his hand into Louis's, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "We're in this together, Louis. I'm not going anywhere." Louis looked down at Harry, the tension in his face softening for just a moment. "I know," he whispered. "And I'm not letting anything happen to you." The street around them was eerily quiet as they made their way back to the car. The city seemed to be holding its breath, the weight of the discovery looming over them. As Louis unlocked the car, a sudden chill ran down his spine, the unmistakable feeling of being watched creeping in. "Wait," Zayn muttered, his eyes darting around. "Something's not right." Louis froze, glancing around the street. It was deserted, too deserted for the middle of the day. His eyes landed on a parked black SUV down the road, its windows tinted too dark to see inside. His stomach flipped, his instincts screaming at him. "Get in the car," Louis ordered, his voice low but firm. Harry hesitated, following Louis's gaze to the SUV. "Louis, what's now?" Louis snapped, pulling open the door and ushering Harry inside. Zayn was already at the driver's seat, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. As soon as they were inside, Zayn revved the engine, speeding down the narrow street, the tires screeching on the asphalt. Louis twisted in his seat, his eyes glued to the rearview mirror. The black SUV hadn't moved, but the ominous feeling lingered. "They know," Zayn muttered, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "They're watching us." Louis clenched his jaw. "They're trying to intimidate us. But it's not going to work." Harry's heart pounded as he looked between Louis and Zayn. What if they're not just watching? What if they won't touch us? Louis interrupted, though even he wasn't sure if he believed it. Not yet. They'll try to scare us first, make us back down. But we won't give them the satisfaction. Zane nodded, though his expression remained grim. Still, we need to lay low for a bit. We can't risk them following us back to the cabin. They might already know where we're hiding. Louis cursed under his breath, running his fingers through his hair. We can't keep running forever. We need a plan, something that'll hit them hard and fast before they can make a move. Zane's phone buzzed, pulling his attention away from the road. He glanced at the screen, his eyes widening. It's Claire. Louis frowned. What does she want? Zane answered, holding the phone to his ear. What's going on? He asked, his voice tense. There was a pause on the other end, and Zane's face hardened. Shit. All right, we'll be there. What happened? Louis asked the moment Zane hung up. Zane's jaw tightened. Claire's in trouble. They found her. She says we need to meet her at a safe house before they catch up to her. Louis' stomach dropped. Claire had helped them, put herself at risk to give them information, and now she was in danger because of it. We're going after her. Zane nodded, taking a sharp turn onto a side road. It's not far, but we have to be careful. If they're after her, they'll be looking for us too. The rest of the drive was tense, silence filling the car as they raced through the city. Louis stared out the window, his mind racing. He had dragged Harry into this mess, and now Claire was caught up in it too. The deeper they dug, the more dangerous it became. By the time they reached the safe house, a small, nondescript building on the outskirts of town, Louis' nerves were on edge. They parked the car a few blocks away, slipping out and making their way through the back alleys to avoid being seen. The door to the safe house was slightly ajar, a faint light flickering inside. Louis pushed it open slowly, stepping into the dimly lit room. Claire was sitting at a small table in the corner, her face pale and drawn. They're close, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't have much time. Louis hurried over to her, kneeling down in front of her chair. What happened? They tracked me, Claire replied, her voice trembling. I didn't think they would find me so fast, but they did. I'm sorry, Louis. I tried to cover my tracks, but these people, they have connections everywhere. Zane leaned against the wall, his arms crossed. What do we do now? Claire looked at him, her eyes filled with fear and determination. You need to go public. Now. You have enough to start something. Get the word out, expose them. If you don't, they'll keep coming after all of us. Louis felt a knot form in his stomach. He knew Claire was right, but going public meant putting all their lives on the line. The people they were up against weren't just powerful, they were ruthless. They wouldn't stop until they silenced anyone who threatened their control. We're not letting them win, Louis said firmly, his hand squeezing Claire's shoulder. We're going to take them down. Zane nodded in agreement, but his expression was dark. We need to be smart about this. One wrong move, and we're done for. Harry, who had been quiet throughout the exchange, finally spoke up. We'll do it. We'll find a way to expose them. But we need to make sure we're safe first. Louis glanced at Harry, his heart swelling with pride and love. Despite the danger, despite the fear, Harry was still standing by his side. And that gave him the strength to keep fighting. They spent the next few hours strategizing, gathering their resources, and planning their next steps. Time was running out, but Louis knew they had one chance to get it right. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the safe house, Louis took Harry's hand, squeezing it gently. We're in this together, he whispered, his voice full of determination. Harry looked up at him, his eyes shining with trust and love. Always. But as they prepared to leave, the sound of footsteps echoed from outside the door, and Louis's heart stopped. They were no longer alone.